right, welcome everybody. Hello, curious cats and corvids. My name is Laura Rubin, and welcome to the extra special Blood Moon Eclipse Mercury is in retrograde edition of Curiosity Guild Wicked Ways. Seems auspicious, right? Before we get started, I want to take a look around. Raise your hand if this is your first Curiosity Guild. Woo, oh my God. Welcome, welcome. For the rest of you, raise your hand if this is your second Curiosity Guild. Awesome, thank you. For the new folks who are new to Curiosity Guild, we are storytellers who love to illuminate the curious corners of history through public talks that celebrate the wonderfully weird. Everyone is invited to contribute. We're always looking for 2 to 12-minute talks about history, science, adventure, art. You tell us. Everyone who has been on this stage was once an audience member. So if you are so inspired, you can pitch anytime at curiosityguild.org/speak. Have an idea but not sure and you kind of want to know more, you can find our curious concierges. They are wearing badges with the cross keys like this. They're mostly in the back, but they are floating around. So speaking of audience participation, we are nerds, but we are not quiet nerds. Nerds. Oh my. Oh dear. This might be one. We'll get there. So here at Curiosity Guild, we are drawing our inspiration from a previous history event thing, and so we are going to embrace the audience participation with some callbacks. So here are some of our favorites. Yes. Also, the wicked Disney aspect of this was just too much. So, I couldn't find a good Frankenstein, but this is good. Burbs! Yay! And yes, that is a yellow-billed magpie over there. Steve! So, all right, with all that out of the way, for tonight's program, we have 6 wonderful talks. We're going to do 4 talks, a break, some bonus content, 2 more talks, and then for this evening, we have some extra bonus content. Yeah. So our folks started talking about all sorts of baddies, from the silver screen to the printed page, from the annals of history to the Audubon Society. So please join me in welcoming Kurt Lawson, Juliana Brodsky, and Michelle Larson, and our 2 brand new speakers, Liz Medina and Matt Goldbra. Yeah. I don't need to tell you, please be very generous with your applause for our amazing speakers. They have worked so hard, we all have. And I will be kicking off our evening with San Francisco, the city that knows how. And what the hell does that mean anyway? So to bring it back to our theme, we can't kill maps, wow, all right. San Francisco was for a time considered the wickedest city in the world. Outside of Paris. The Paris thing comes up a lot, at least mostly by the church people. And really, it just kind of sounds like some people who are pretty extreme FOMO cases, right? From the very early days of the gold rush, the hollow between Telegraph, Russian, and Nob Hill was a nice windbreak where you could have entertainment. And while the honest miners flocked to San Francisco and then left, other people came to San Francisco to fleece the flock, which was a tradition that continued for over a century. So the area of vice was centered on Pacific Street, which is now Pacific Avenue, from Stockton to Montgomery, and the surrounds. That's the second block from the water, just about, during this time. And the maze of piers funneled sailors, immigrants, travelers, and tourists all through a landscape of brothels, bars, dance halls, saloons, opium dens, gambling parlors, and so on. So basically like a little bit like Vegas, right? The entertainments were lowbrow, they were crass, they were intentionally shocking, with everything from dogfights to naked dancers to a couple of acts that the author I was reading only vaguely described as both the woman and the pony participated. Yeah. Let's not make that one a callback, please. Rob. So, cheerfully, brawls, stabbings, knife fights, and shooting were really common in the course of a night out, along with kidnapping, actual trafficking, and murder. And as a quick side note, the Barbary Coast lapped up against Chinatown, and the opium and the sex trafficking and the violence of the Tong Wars really contributed to the Barbary Coast mystique, but that is a very, very culturally important and sensitive topic, and I do not have time for that today, so I'm just going to leave it there. So, a gold rush town, usually a collection of ne'er-do-wells, and San Francisco was no exception, but the truly evil ones that showed up was a collection of convicts who'd escaped from the penal colonies in Australia and started a gang called the Sydney Ducks. I don't know if any of you have heard of them. You can actually see in the map that actually says Sydney Town because they had that whole area. They built taverns and groggeries, deadfall bars, dance halls, lodging houses. And while these things weren't like in and of themselves bad, they might have gone ignored. They were actually just kind of their intake funnel for more mayhem. So they frequently would take their patrons and force them until they drunk till they blacked out. They would straight up drug them, or they'd tie them up and then take all their things, all the way down to their clothing. So if you've ever seen a cartoon where some guy is walking around the street wearing a barrel, that's a reference to this practice. Yeah. So even that all might have gone unpunished, but then they had to go and do the arson. Yeah. Why? Because if anyone remembers the gangs of New York, everyone flees a burning building and then it's very easy to rob. So I don't need to add that in a world of canvas tents and oil lamps and unpainted wood, fire was a really big problem. And so it was extra bad that they didn't do it just once. They didn't do it twice. They did it 5 times. This is the first and probably the first, but definitely not the last time that Californians have been gouged for fire insurance. I know. So the newly formed San Francisco Police Department actually did nothing because it turned out they only recently turned to be police officers. And so a Frenchman, Albert Bernard de Rissailles, writes, "The police force is largely made up of ex-bandits, and naturally, the members are interested mostly in saving their friends from punishment." Oops. The lack of response caused a huge revolt among the residents. They formed the first vigilance committee in 1851 to take matters into their own hands. This is vigilantism, the actual thing. SFPD tried to reorganize in 1854. Didn't work, failed to solve the bandit problem, so there was a second vigilance committee in 1856. Both times, the committees hanged the worst offenders, forced corrupt government officials to resign, and then gave up their power after 3 months. And all of this is commemorated by this nice plaque on the edge of a loading dock by an abandoned Walgreens. Yes, Fort Gunnybags. It's actually a very nice plaque. I'm glad they took it and put it back up. So after all of this, the crime didn't die down. The police and the vice, entertainment districts kind of struck a live and let live truce, and the real era of the Barbary Coast began. So it's an uneasy piece. The Barbary Coast had newly arrived and returning weekender prospectors. A lot of them were commuting on steamships to and from the gold fields. And this pattern of constantly circulating crowds lasted through the first gold rush, the Quicksilver Rush, the Copper Rush that gave us Copperopolis, the Comstock Lode that gave us Virginia City, and the second gold rush in the Eastern Sierra that gave us Bodie. And so, by this time, San Francisco had established itself as a hub of finance and commerce. So Eastern and foreign companies were importing goods into San Francisco because they could sell them at 10 or 20 times the normal price. So as they say, in a gold rush, sell shovels, well, or picks. So the price gouging was really doubly real for fresh food and vegetables since there were very few farms. And many of the folks in the diggings were just surviving on salt pork and beans. So there is a breathless account of a man paying a whole $1 for a single boiled egg in a restaurant, which maybe feels familiar too. Which actually, once I put the conversion rate, that's actually like $42 an egg. So, whew. So as the price of goods skyrocketed, people started manufacturing right in the city. And so by the time the Transcontinental Railroad arrived, instead of shipping goods from the east into San Francisco, it opened up other markets to San Francisco goods. The other thing that the railroads brought were curious travelers, tourists, and quite frankly, vice rubberneckers. So some people come to California for the scenery, some people come because it's good for your tuberculosis. Also too soon, but yeah, get your tests. But others came to specifically sample the notorious entertainment. So a vast, thriving theater district formed to the southwest. There were lots of legitimate bars and clubs that sprung up around it. And to many in town, and especially the newspaper guys, they viewed the Barbary Coast as just like the Devil's Acre. It's a beautiful bar. An embarrassment, and quite frankly, like a literal Gomorrah that they wanted to be wiped off the map and cleansed with fire. San Francisco tourism boosters called San Francisco the Paris of the West. There's Paris again. And Daniel Burnham designed a remodel for the city to give it sweeping boulevards and Parisian-style plazas. And so in response, the Barbary Coast obligingly opened a club they called the Red Mill, for the Moulin Rouge. M.H. DeYoung, seeing an opportunity to attract a better class of visitor with the developing World's Fair circuit, raised funds for the 1894 Midwinter Exposition, which is the city's first major tourist event. But the Barbary Coast remained sort of like a blight and a blank spot on the tourism board maps. So, April 18th, 1906, the monkey's hand twitched, and the newspapermen got their wish, kind of. So the entire area of the Barbary Coast was leveled and then burnt in the fires, along with most of downtown, including all the newspaper guys' buildings. Not entirely everything. I don't know how many of you are familiar. Hoteling, the whiskey importer, somehow was spared. So one of my favorite quotes, right? If, as they say, God spanked the town for being over frisky, why did he burn the churches down, but save Hoteling's whiskey? No notes. So, sensing an opportunity, the city stepped in and tried to eminent domain, seize, redevelop Chinatown and the Barbary Coast, but pretty soon, the area was already mostly rebuilt. So Daniel Burnham, poor man, never did get his plazas. But although the area rebuilt, the new modern fixtures and modern architecture kind of killed the appetite for the wild, murderous ways. So instead, the district began to grow separate areas. So there was a music district that sort of split off, traveled west, hopscotched over the theater district, and became what we now know as the Fillmore. The dance halls and girly shows moved just north up Columbus, where they still remain. So by 1911, it's clear San Francisco was on the rise. Campaigning by the newspaper guys made sure that San Francisco's bid for the Panama Pacific International Exposition of 1915 beat out San Diego's. That is a whole different talk and a very fun beef. President Taft, when he signed the proclamation, said, "San Francisco will build it because she knows how." And so that stuck. So now, the city that knows how threw itself into building this thing. The other thing the newspapermen were doing was campaigning against, you guessed it, the continued vice of the Barbary Coast. They spent countless column inches railing against depravity and urging a fresh start. Liquor licenses became restricted. In 1914, they passed the Red Light Abatement Act, which said that women, employees, or customers could not be in a building that served alcohol if it fell in this red zone. And then the blue zone was the original boundaries of the sort of district. So you can see that they were really targeting the remains. Without their hostesses, the bars dwindled and closed. The brothels just gave up. And the body reviews migrated out of the area, just in time to disappoint lots of male exposition tourists who had been looking forward to it. He looks so sad. So the Peapie opened for crowds of American tourists hungry for beauty and escape from the looming threat of war. And so the main blocks of the former Barbary Coast became Terrific Street, a new but short-lived hub for ragtime, fancy animal dances, which really, this is like the first TikTok craze where you look really silly, but you're doing it with your friends. Drag, early jazz, and body but fully clothed reviews. Yeah. 18 months after the close of the PPIE, the United States entered World War I. Hordes of servicemen either about to embark on leave or returning wounded passed through the district and took solace in the music, the food, the dancing, and the drink, just like all the other tourists. However, in 1918, wartime prohibition started, theoretically to save grain for famine relief in Europe, but really just as a practice run for actual prohibition that arrived in 1920. Boo. So while everywhere else in the country, bars were being terrorized by hatchet-wielding grandmas, and breweries had to retool or close, in San Francisco, a lot of establishments just like took down their signs and advertised that they were selling something else, but just kept serving to anyone who looked like they were a local. So then Mayor James Sonny Jim Rolfe Jr. objected to prohibition, believing that drinking was a victimless crime, and saying that many of San Francisco's founding populations, Irish, Italian, Hispanic, had cultural significance to alcohol use. Just as a side note, I think he drunk Colonel Sanders under the table to get that necktie. So he underscored this point during the 1920 Democratic National Convention by providing every delegate who asked a full bottle of whiskey as a gift. Yep. Overnight, San Francisco became one of the most popular convention towns. I'm not even joking. It was them and St. Paul and Chicago. It turned out that the very large waterfront, the open ocean access, and even our very own Carl the Fog made it really easy to smuggle in high-quality booze from everywhere else, which meant that nobody was getting rot gut and bathtub gin. Awesome. Yeah. So in 1921, well, I mean, you know, not getting rot gut is good. Yes. Just so we're clear. In 1921, SFPD actually disciplined one of their officers for wasting too much time enforcing prohibition. And in 1926, the city passed a resolution saying that they would no longer waste police resources on enforcing it. So far from being the wickedest city in the West, San Francisco now became the wettest city in the West. Estimates around the end of Prohibition tallied over 14,000 speakeasies in San Francisco alone, and that's not counting Oakland, Sausalito, so on. The city that knows how proved that it still knew how to have a good time. Prohibition ended in 1933, and after the partying and hangovers, the city's breweries, distilleries, wineries, and bars got back to business as usual. Tourists and conventioneers still came to San Francisco, but less for the vice tourism, and more for the climate, the landscape, and multiculturalism, right? Okay, I'm lying. Right, that's not entirely true. So San Francisco was still known as a huge party town, full of bars and erotic dancers and theater and music and jazz. So this is a promotional map from 1946 called the Reveler's Route. And it gives you a starting point. And it's hard to see, but there's like a little path that goes through there. And where you end is seeing pink elephants. And it takes you through the remains of the Barbary Coast drinking establishments. So alcohol and nudity continued and still continue to be a big tourist draw. And the spirit of the Barbary Coast. So following Prohibition, there was just huge surge in nostalgic movies about the Barbary Coast, some making the district the villain, and some, also that is John Wayne. And some, especially post-Hays Code, focusing on rehabilitating the operators, completely whitewashing all the trafficking and murder, right? So this persisted, as one does, right? This persisted all the way up through the 70s and 80s. There was a Bugs Bunny cartoon. You know it's been washed over. And then a Family Hour show called The Barbary Coast with, yes, that is Captain Kirk. So here we have it. To San Francisco, may you all raise a glass. We may be wicked, but we sure know how to have a good time. Thank you.